It is the language spoken by the granite monument standing sentinel against the endless churn of history. We begin here, at the heart of the reckoning, where the names are few, but the shadows are infinite. This is not a memorial to victory, nor to glorious endeavor, but a stark, profound acknowledgement of suffering endured in the deepest secrecy. The air here hangs heavy, thick with the unaddressed legacy of a wartime regime obsessed with maximizing human cruelty. Pause now and listen for the echoes of the unheard victims who perished during the Imperial Japanese Army's relentless and utterly terrifying pursuit of chemical warfare dominance. Their silent sacrifice demands our attention, demanding that we confront the darkness hidden just beneath the surface of modern tranquility. To understand the atrocity, we must look to the location itself. Okunoshima, commonly known today as Rabbit Island, a serene, deceptively picturesque spot in the Seto Inland Sea. This idyllic veneer masks its true identity, the epicenter of Japan's biological and chemical weapon manufacturing apparatus from 1929 to 1945. It was deliberately wiped from early post-war maps, a calculated erasure designed to bury the heinous operations conducted here. For nearly 2 decades, this island was hell-confined, producing tons of deadly agents like mustard gas and lewisite. The natural beauty of the island today serves only to amplify the chilling contrast with the industrial nightmare that once poisoned its soil and its air, a nightmare sustained by the lives of those forced into its deadly proximity. The genesis of this horror was rooted in imperial ambition and the military desire for decisive, destructive superiority. Following the devastation of World War I, and despite international treaties attempting to ban such weapons, the Imperial Army secretly launched its own program. Driven by the fear of being technologically outmatched, facilities were constructed rapidly, shrouded in absolute secrecy. This clandestine operation was supported by a brutal administrative machinery that prioritized military necessity over basic human dignity. It was a state-sponsored conspiracy of silence, ensuring that the necessary workforce, comprising conscripted laborers, local workers, and in some cases, unwilling test subjects, had absolutely no recourse or escape from the toxicity they were forced to manufacture and inhale daily. The system was designed to exploit, contaminate, and forget. Deep within the heavily guarded factories, the atmosphere was a noxious cocktail of sulfur, chlorine, and raw fear. Workers, often unaware of the deadly substances they handled, labored without proper protective gear. These facilities were chemical weapons synthesis laboratories, masquerading as ordinary industrial plants. The volume of production was staggering, with the island becoming a primary source for the chemical agents deployed by the Japanese military in China. The conditions inside were utterly lethal. Leaks were common, safety protocols were non-existent, and injuries were permanent, frequently resulting in catastrophic long-term respiratory and dermatological damage. For every ton of blistering agent produced, a piece of human health, a sliver of life expectancy, was tragically sacrificed to the machinery of war. The scope of the tragedy extended far beyond accidental industrial contamination. While Okunoshima was the manufacturing base, the shadow of intentional human experimentation, closely tied to clandestine research units like the notorious Unit 731, looms large over this history. Although documentation regarding the use of island workers as test subjects is meticulously scarce due to post-war destruction, the sheer volume of untested agents manufactured here suggests a sinister need for practical lethality data. Whether factory worker or unwilling captive, the victims share a unified narrative. Their bodies were instruments of military research, disposable assets in a ruthless chemical arms race. The exact count of those who died from direct testing or severe chronic exposure during the war years may never be known, cementing their status as truly forgotten martyrs of science gone rogue.
The chemical agents themselves are terrifying footnotes in the history of warfare. Mustard gas, or sulfur mustard, caused agonizing blisters, internal bleeding, and irreversible respiratory failure. Lewisite, an arsenic-based agent, was even more rapid, inducing severe pain, skin damage, and pulmonary edema, often leading to immediate fatality. These poisons were not designed to merely injure. They were crafted to inflict maximum suffering, overwhelming medical resources, and terrorizing civilian populations. We must visualize the consequences: the excruciating burns, the blindness, the slow, suffocating deaths endured by those exposed, whether on the testing grounds or within the confines of the production line. This island was the forge where human ingenuity was perverted into mass chemical destruction, leaving a toxic legacy that poisoned generations. As the war drew to its desperate conclusion, the priority shifted instantly from production to total concealment. The Japanese Imperial Army undertook a sweeping campaign of destruction, meticulously burning records, dismantling key equipment, and attempting to physically erase the evidence of their chemical warfare program. When U.S. occupation forces arrived, a dark bargain was struck: immunity for key researchers and leaders in exchange for invaluable data on chemical and biological warfare experimentation. This Faustian pact ensured the truth remained buried. The history of suffering was exchanged for scientific intelligence, condemning the victims and surviving workers to decades of silence and neglect. The systemic destruction of evidence stands as one of history's most effective cover-ups. The physical remnants of the poisoning persisted long after the war ended and the factories were torn down. For decades, the soil of Okunoshima remained dangerously contaminated, and countless unexploded chemical ordnance were scattered throughout the region and the surrounding waters. Cleanup efforts were slow, often insufficient, and largely ignored by the government for years. Former workers suffering debilitating chronic illnesses, severe asthma, persistent skin conditions, cancers, were left without adequate medical support or compensation. The contamination was not just historical, it was a present-day reality, a creeping poison that continued to erode the lives of those who had innocently contributed to the production of death. The island itself became a metaphor for history's hidden scars, refusing to heal while the government refused to acknowledge the wounds. It took decades for the true voices of the victims to rise above the engineered silence. Beginning in the 1980s, surviving former workers, many facing imminent mortality due to chronic health issues, began to organize, demanding governmental acknowledgement and compensation. This struggle was arduous, facing legal hurdles and institutional denial. They fought not just for financial aid, but for the validation of their suffering, determined that their involuntary contribution to the war effort should not be erased from the national memory. Their persistent, often painful testimony finally forced a reluctant public confrontation with this dark chapter. This movement, led by the aged and the infirm, was a monumental act of courage, pushing back against the inertia of official history to ensure that truth would finally surface. The construction of the monument was the physical manifestation of this hard-won battle for memory. It serves as a necessary focal point for the tragedy, a place where people can finally mourn, reflecting the broader societal obligation to acknowledge past wrongs. Dedicated to the victims of the chemical weapons factory, it stands as a testament to the power of citizen activism to force historical reckoning. This monument is not just about the dead, it's a warning to the living. It reminds us that state secrecy, when combined with military expediency, creates fertile ground for dehumanization and atrocity. It is a humble structure, but its message is monumental: that every life sacrificed in the name of war technology must be fully accounted for, regardless of how painful the admission might be. Today, the monument stands not only as a localized act of remembrance, but as a demand for global responsibility. It forces a dialogue about the ethical boundaries of warfare and the lasting environmental and human damage caused by weapons of mass destruction. While the story centers on Japan, the lessons are universal. The failure to protect vulnerable workers, the use of experimental subjects, and the decades-long attempt to suppress the truth. True historical reckoning requires more than just a stone pillar. It requires continuous education,
transparency regarding remaining contamination, and absolute commitment to supporting the remaining survivors and their families. We must recognize that the cost of secrecy is always measured in human lives and lasting societal corrosion.
The echoes of the toxic years still whisper on Okunoshima. As we conclude our journey into this dark history, we are left with the imperative of memory. We must never allow the convenience of forgetting to supersede the necessity of truth. The victims of Japan's secret chemical weapons program deserve to be fully integrated into the annals of history, their suffering acknowledged, their memory honored. Let this monument stand as a beacon against future atrocities, a solemn promise that the price of silence is simply too high for humanity to bear. Thank you for confronting this difficult history with us. If you found this documentary important and enlightening, please take a moment to engage with our channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on crucial historical discoveries and complex narratives.